A new national poll shows the candidates in a dead heat. Trump is now calling on Harris to take a cognitive test. But as her campaign points out, the vice president has released a new detailed letter from her doctor saying she is in, quote, excellent health. She calls on Trump to release his medical records.
It's been nearly a year since Trump put out a letter from his doctor saying his, quote, overall health is excellent. Let's go live to Erie, Pennsylvania with CNN's Priscilla Alvarez, who's covering the Harris campaign. Priscilla, Harris is ramping up claims that the Trump team isn't being transparent about his fitness. Tell us more.
Yeah, Boris, this is a new line of attack that the vice president launched yesterday and over the course of interviews as well, essentially arguing that by him not participating in some interviews and not releasing his medical records, that he may not be fit for office. Take a listen.
His staff won't let him do a 60 Minutes interview. Every president for the last half century has done one, anyone who's running for president. Everyone has done it, except Donald Trump. He will not debate me again. I put out my medical records. He won't put out his medical records. And you have to ask, why is his staff doing that? And it may be because they think he's just not ready and unfit and unstable and should not have that level of transparency for the American people.
Now, while the vice president is hammering her Republican rival, she's also focused on locking in her coalition, doubling down on black voter outreach and trying to fill the void when it comes to questions about her own proposals, especially on the economy. So today she is going to unveil here in Erie some of those proposals. That includes, for example, forgivable loans to entrepreneurs of up to $20,000, promoting apprenticeships, and legalizing recreational marijuana, among other measures. Taken together, it's a sweeping proposal and an attempt by the vice president and her team to appeal to black voters, because while polls show that she has the majority of black voters behind her, there has been an erosion of support when compared to other election cycles. And the fear among advisors is that some of these voters decide to sit out the election or vote for Donald Trump. So that is the work that they are trying to make up for over the course of the week. Tomorrow, for example, she'll be in Detroit, where she'll be participating in a radio town hall with Charlemagne the God, who has millions of listeners, many of whom are black. And later in the week, she'll also be returning to Michigan. So the campaign, clearly with this travel blitz across the blue wall, trying to lock in this coalition for what may be the surest path to 270 for this campaign come November.
Okay, Priscilla Alvarez, thank you very much. Let's bring in CNN national political reporter Daniel Strauss. He's covering the Trump campaign. So, Daniel, what does former President Trump plan to do during his time in Pennsylvania?
Similar to Harris in its own way, Trump plans to focus on the economy and specifically his bread and butter issues. He plans to talk about tariffs. He plans to talk about taxation. Now, let's be clear about Trump. You never quite know what he's going to say on stage, but it is telling in the final few weeks of this campaign that both Harris and Trump see the economy as the message they need to hone into in Pennsylvania. Remember, this is also a state that both camps see as the deciding state in this election. Because it's so close, whichever way Pennsylvania goes, they expect that way is how the presidential election will go. And both campaigns, the Harris and Trump campaign, expect that the economy is the winning issue to telegraph in these final weeks.
Daniel Strauss, thank you so much for the update. Joining us now to discuss is the Duchess of Hialeah, Florida, Sabrina Rodriguez, a national political reporter for the Washington Post, and Mike Madrid, co-founder of the Lincoln Project and the author of The Latino Century, How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. Thank you both for being with us. Mike, first to you, I want to dig into the numbers and this new New York Times Siena College poll showing Harris leading Trump 56 to 30% among Latino voters. She is underperforming the last three Democratic presidential nominees. She's still winning among Latino voters, but that is significant because this could be a race that is won in the margins. Does she have enough time to turn this around?
Well, first, let me say what an honor it is to be on with the Duchess. So thanks for that. But let me also say that, yeah, I think you characterized it perfectly. There is some weakness here, and it is fixable. There is time. but they're running short on time. I'm glad that to see her closing on kind of these economic issues. Kamala Harris has made a lot of the right adjustments to get back into a more competitive position for Democrats over the past 100 days or so than where they were prior. She has done a good job. The question is, does she have enough time in that short window to overcome a lot of what the Democrats had been doing for the past 12 or 15 years, where they had been consistently leaking Latino voters? And we obviously won't know until Election Day. But what I will say is a lot of this was unnecessary. A lot of this is self-inflicted wounds. The Democrats had time and plenty of evidence to make this correction earlier. I think she's doing everything right. We're just going to have to see if she can break through on it.
That's interesting. Sabrina, what do you think? I mean, 22 days is not that long. So what can she do to alter that?
Well, first, it's an honor to be with the most famous person in Hialeah. I have to acknowledge it.
Get out of here. That's false.
But I think the Harris campaign, I mean, they're acknowledging there's been a long time misconception with Latino voters that they only care about immigration or that is the top issue for them. We're seeing the Harris campaign really talk to Latino voters like everyone else. They understand that for Latino voters, the biggest issues are inflation, the economy, the cost of living, housing, and for some, it's reproductive rights. For some, it's climate change. I mean, they recognize that there is diversity within Latino voters in the same way that we see it amongst everyone else. And even on the specific issue of immigration, they recognize that there's nuances to it. I think one of the most interesting things we saw from the New York Times Siena poll this weekend focused on Latino voters was that a majority actually are not offended by what Donald Trump is saying about immigration. They don't take it personally. They don't think when he's giving, he's saying his anti-immigrant rhetoric that it is referring to them. So in conversations with the Latino voters across the country, I mean, you just hear them saying many are sympathetic towards immigrants. Many are saying they want pathways to citizenship, but they're also concerned about the border. They also see an issue in the past few years.
Yeah, Allison, I'm not sure if you know, Hialeah, Sabrina and I are from the same place,
I've just
Florida.
gathered that.
Yeah.
I've just gathered there's a backstory
and
here.
something that she said about that poll stood out to me because it's something that I've heard repeatedly from talking to folks back home, Sabrina, and it's the idea, and we have those numbers, I think, it's the idea that even folks that were born in another country, more than half of them, Latino voters, do not believe that Donald Trump is talking to them when he says things like migrants are taking over the country, we're going to have migrant camps all over the place if Kamala Harris wins. So I wonder, what is he saying to them that then appeals to those voters that are trending toward Republicans?
Well, he's playing on a nuance here within the Latino community. I mean, we hear it when he's on the campaign trail saying that these immigrants are taking Black and Hispanic jobs. He's saying, he's creating this caste system, this class system amongst Latino voters and saying they're others. The people that are coming now are others. You're a hardworking American. You pay your taxes, or he's trying to create these misconceptions. And a lot of it is based off of falsehoods and fear mongering that we see, but it has been effective within a group. And I think an important thing to point out, though, is Harris is still winning a majority of Latino voters. I think that as soon as we start talking about inroads that Trump's making, then it becomes a debate over how much. And he doesn't need to win a majority of Latino voters to really make a dent in some of these key battleground states. And it's not just the states that we typically hear about Latino voters, and it's not just Arizona and Nevada or Florida. It's places like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, too, that have such a growing population.
Analysis right now, our political experts are with us, and David Chalian, you're a political expert. Talk a little bit about why Kamala Harris decided to spend so much time trying to focus in on the votes of Black men. She seems to be lagging in that area right now.
Well, she's lagging as it compares to Joe Biden's performance. She's not lagging against Donald Trump. She still has a big advantage here, but as you know, margins are everything, especially in a race this close. So if you look at the New York Times Siena poll, looking at Black voters in this season, what you see here, overall support, Harris at 78% among African-American likely voters, Donald Trump at 15%. I said only at 15%, except that what you see here is a narrower margin between the Democrat and the Republican than we have seen in recent cycles. And you look at it broken out by gender there as well. Black men specifically, Wolf, in the New York Times poll, 70% support of Harris. Trump gets 20% of them. Now, if you compare those numbers to the 2020 exit polls, you'll see the difference I'm talking about here. So there, you see that Biden had a 75 percentage point advantage over Trump among African-American voters overall, 87% to 12%. Even among black male voters, you see Biden's numbers at 79%. You just saw in the New York Times poll, Kamala Harris is at 70%. So if that's where the voters end up on Election Day, if she's at 70% with black male voters and she's at 83%, as the New York Times had, with black female voters, she'll be well below where Joe Biden was performing with these voters just 4 years ago. And that becomes a problem, a math problem for her, because she has to look elsewhere in the electorate to make up for that.
Yeah, it's an important point. So, Kate Bedingfield, is this outreach we're seeing from Harris over these past several days now going to be successful? What do you think?
I think it's smart for her to do. Obviously, this is a key piece of the coalition that she needs to put together in order to win this election. So elections are about making sure that people feel heard, that they feel seen and included in your message. And so for her to put together a really concerted effort here to make sure that she is speaking to black men, both through the policies that she's introducing, but also through the media she's doing. And she's looking to really make sure that she's going to outlets that are, where the audience is a smart thing to do. But I think, the problem that Trump has here is that he's leaning on low propensity voters who, by definition, don't turn out to vote all that often. So this is where the Harris field operation comes into play. This is where this could be the margin, because what Trump needs is for black men and other voters who don't frequently turn out to vote for him. That's a harder thing to do.
Very hard to do, but it's so critically important right now. Shermichael Singleton is with us as well. Shermichael, what do you make of Kamala Harris's outreach to black men right now? Will her message and her agenda resonate?
Wolf, I think it's important based upon the data we've seen thus far. I've had the opportunity to look at some of the policy proposals in the document that they released today. For the most part, I actually agree with a lot of it. I mean, I think African-American men certainly need more attention as it pertains to academic attainment. We're falling behind black women. We're falling behind women writ large. You have also seen a lot of younger black men have a very difficult and challenging time finding proper work that yields some type of economic freedom in the long run. And so for the most part, I think the policies are good. I don't see those things through a partisan lens. However, I think the vice president has to figure out a way to increase her margins writ large with African-American voters if she's expected to win this thing in November. She's suffering by, I think, a 14, 15-point deficit with men voters writ large. Hillary Clinton had about 11-point deficit with men in 2016. She ultimately did not win that election. Now, if you're a Democrat, perhaps you're calculating or hoping that women will somehow provide a buffer for the men that you lose. But as David Chalian pointed out, this is going to be one on the margins. That's a risk that if I were a Democrat, I wouldn't be comfortable with making. So I think this is a step in the right direction for Democrats. I'm just not convinced, Wolf, that it'll actually yield the results they need with 22 days remaining.
It's interesting, David, we just heard today that Kamala Harris is going to be doing her first ever interview with Fox News later this week on Wednesday with their anchor Bret Baier. Why is she doing this now? What are her calculations?
If you talk to anyone in the Harris campaign, I think there are two main universes of voters left that they are trying to get out to the polls and to vote for them. One is a group of voters who may be naturally aligned, think younger voters or voters of color, to support Harris, but actually they're disengaged, they're low information voters, and they're actually going to end up deciding between not voting or maybe going to vote for Harris. That's one big pot. The other pot is these Republicans and independents who may be Republican-leaning, Wolf, who are not in favor of Donald Trump. Think of it as a Nikki Haley voter that we saw in the primaries. Think of it, some of these white college-educated Republican voters in the suburbs. This voter is why I think she's going on Fox News. I mean, it's a attention dominance scheme to try to just, hey, she's never done this before. Sit down with Fox News, the Democratic nominee, and make a big splash in a game when you have 21 days left of trying to dominate the attention. But I think as a targeting perspective, they are still trying to reach what they did with the Liz Cheney endorsement, that country over party. I think that's the kind of voter she's trying to target when she sits down with Fox News.
You think this is a risky move, Kate?
I think there's a little risk in it, of course, but I also think that in a very close race, you have to leave everything on the field. And I think, David's right that it is an attention gathering. It's a narrative dominating move. So, it buys her a day or two kind of, in the sort of prominence of the national narrative. But more importantly, if you think about the Republican primary, there were a not insignificant number of Republican voters who voted for other Republicans, did not vote for Donald Trump. A lot of those people watch Fox News. She needs some of those voters as part of her coalition, especially if she is going to underperform a little bit with some of these other key members of the coalition. And so speaking directly to those voters through Fox News is a bold and smart thing to do.
Just how close this race is right now.
I appreciate that you called it the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, not the state. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, my dear friend. Look, let's take a look at these key battleground states. You mentioned Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. You look 3 weeks ago. Look, it was a 2-point lead for Harris in Pennsylvania, 2 points in Wisconsin, 2 points in Michigan. Now, that was a pretty gosh darn tight race. I didn't think it could get any tighter. Turns out I was wrong. Not the first time my girlfriend would tell you. Look at where we are today. Pennsylvania, a point. Wisconsin, a point. Michigan, a point. I have been covering presidential campaigns now for more than a decade. I'm starting to look my age, but I've been following significantly longer than that. I have never seen consistently tight polling such as this across the battleground states in all the time that I've been looking and covering politics, Jake.
And Harry, how is Harris doing in those states compared to how Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton were doing at this same stage of the race?
Yeah, I think this is what gives Democrats agita because, yeah, it looks like Harris is slightly ahead, though well within the margin of error. But compared to where we were 4 years ago and 8 years ago, at this point, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, an average across all three. Right now, you got Harris by a point in all three across the average of the three. But Joe Biden was up by 8. Hillary Clinton was up by 8. I don't have to tell you, Hillary Clinton lost all three of these states. Joe Biden barely won all three of these states. And so I think the question that Democrats have to ask themselves at this particular point is, can Harris actually hold on, given that Joe Biden barely did and Hillary Clinton did not across these three states, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, because obviously Donald Trump tends to overperform on Election Day compared to the polls. How is the race to 270 electoral votes? Because obviously this is not a popular vote race. It is an electoral vote race. Race to 270. How's that looking?
Yeah, all right. So let's say the final result matches the polls exactly right. And note, taking into account our last discussion, I had Nevada here in yellow. But if we look at Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, if she carries all three, that gets Kamala Harris to exactly 270 electoral votes. But that is well within the margin of error, way too close to call. And you hinted at it, Mr. Tapper. What happens if Trump outperforms the polls by just a mere point, something that in 2016 and 2020 he did more than that? Look at that. He gets to 312 electoral votes because he carries Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So at this particular hour, this race is way too close to call. I have no clue who's going to win, Jake.
Nor do I. Harry Enten, thanks so much. Always good to have you on. Let's go right to our panel. Alyssa, how are Republicans feeling about this battleground state polling?
Cautiously optimistic. Listen, Kamala Harris had tremendous momentum coming out of her convention, and then she did have this great debate performance where the majority of voters thought that she beat Donald Trump. But somehow the race is just simply tightening up. There's a level of optimism. Donald Trump's moving up in the key Sun Belt states as well. So all eyes are really going to be on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as they have been for the last 6 months. And Donald Trump is playing smart there. And I want to note a specific demographic that I'm not convinced is properly measuring in polls and could actually end up benefiting Donald Trump, which is young, white, male voters who are first-time voters. He has been targeting these folks on podcasts, call them the Joe Rogan, the Barstool Sports voters. Those are people we may not actually be seeing turn out in some of these polls who are going to show up for the first time for Donald Trump. So nobody should be resting easy right now.
Ashley, the Harris campaign has a new proposal aimed at black male voters, including $1 million in forgivable loans for black entrepreneurs and others to start businesses, training and mentorship programs, investing in black male teachers, regulating cryptocurrency, addressing health challenges that disproportionately affect black men, legalizing recreational marijuana usage. That's kind of bearing the lead on that one. How does the Harris campaign turn this into actual votes?
Well, today she was in conversations with the Shade Room. She did a conversation with Roland Martin. Tomorrow she's going to be in conversation with Charlemagne the God. A lot of people still have been saying they need to know more about her. And the last couple of days, there's been this media frenzy about whether or not Black men are going to support Kamala Harris. Well, she then laid out a policy proposal exactly for Black men. And now she's going to push this message where a lot of them get their news. So in addition to the media, in addition to the policy, then she has the ground game, the infrastructure in battleground states, having surrogates out there talking to voters. And now it's about turning those individuals who like what she has to say into actual votes by either early voting, voting by mail, or getting them to the polls on time. So I think this approach is smart. She knows that Black men are an important part of her constituency. They are not bleeding as many people believe, but we want them that percentage point to go up higher to make her chances of winning in many of these battleground states stronger.
Keith, what do you think?
Well, I agree with what Ashley said. Allison said. I think the campaign is now really super focused, hyper focused on getting out those persuadable voters, or voters who just haven't yet had the incentive to turn out. Black men are a key component of that. Black men voted 87% for Joe Biden in the last election. I think she wants to get that number up around the same percentage point for this election. And I think she's doing it effectively. This is a full court press that they have going on right now. They're going everywhere, all across the media. They got Barack Obama out. They got Magic Johnson out. They got Raphael Warnock out. They got everybody out there talking about these issues. And she's actually listening to Black men. She's not just throwing out some platinum plan as Trump tried to do a few years ago and pretend that that's supposed to be an excuse for Black men, a panacea to reach Black men. She's actually listening to our concerns and proposing real ideas, not just business loans, but more jobs for people without college degrees, more Black male teachers. I'm a former Black male teacher myself. I know how important it is to see Black men in the front of the classroom. Those types of things actually make an impact, and creating pathways through apprenticeships and mentor programs that will actually make that happen is going to be super effective in terms of reaching Black men. But it's a long stretch, and there's a lot of work to do. I think she's doing everything she needs to do to make that happen.
Alyssa, what do you think of Harris sitting down with Fox for an interview in Pennsylvania?
I think it's smart. I think she's going where the voters are. I probably would have advised her to do it a month ago. Listen, there are reachable voters at Fox News, and what she needs to show up and do is make people who've been fed a steady appetite, a steady diet of she's unintelligent, she's not serious enough to be president, she couldn't stare down Vladimir Putin, the lines that they're hearing from Donald Trump and his allies. And she needs to show up and give a performance like she did in the debate that showed she's prepared, she has a command of the issues. So even if she may not be where some of these voters are on certain issues, she can talk about the key ones where she's with them. Think of the border security bill that Donald Trump blocked. She can talk about how much of an impact it would have actually had over the last several months to secure the border. Talk about how his tariffs would contribute to inflation and be a tax on consumers. So there's some areas for her to win. It's high risk, but potentially high reward.
It's certainly her stepping outside her comfort zone, which is not something, Keith, that we've seen Donald Trump do. He is stuck almost exclusively, I think, with friendly conservative interviewers.
Yeah, I think Trump is running clear base election. He's trying to get out his people. He's running a very, I think, a mean-spirited campaign, to be honest with you, Jake. And I think he's hoping that will actually motivate some people in his base to turn out. I don't think he's trying to reach the people who are in the middle. He's not trying to reach moderate voters. He's trying to persuade those people who are far-right, MAGA, Trump possible people to actually turn out and vote. And I don't know whether that's going to be an effective strategy. I mean, I don't know if the polls are actually accurate. And that's one of the things I wanted to say about what you were saying with Harry Hinton earlier. I saw a CBS News poll that came out just yesterday that said that Kamala Harris's Black support is pretty much where it was with Joe Biden 4 years ago. So I don't want to focus on the polls. I want people to get their head out of the polls and start focusing on what we can do to elect Kamala Harris. And that means turning out the vote, volunteering, campaigning, and donating to her campaign.
I don't think any of these polls are factual assertions. They're the best analysis of the data they have in front of them. And I think that the conclusion is, it's really tight in every battleground state. I think that's a fair point. Ashley, also on Fox, Trump is going to participate in this town hall with all female voters. Obviously, that's an attempt to shore up what is a real gender gap. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. People talk about pieces of Kamala Harris's coalition that are weak. There's parts of Donald Trump's coalition that is weak also. white women are looking at Kamala Harris because of reproductive freedom, because of the overturning of Roe. There is a massive gender gap right now, and Donald Trump is trying to persuade those women that he will, quote unquote, be his protectors. I don't think it will resonate with them, but he needs to talk to women voters as well. He cannot just rely on young white males to get him over this finish line.
All right. We'll bring back you guys a little bit later in the show. Thank you so much.